18 animals. 18 individual black-footed ferrets were all that were left of the species in the fall of 1985. Only a decade earlier, the small, playful creature, the only ferret native to North America, was even thought to be extinct. The tale of the black-footed ferret is a sad one, an animal nearly brought to the brink of extinction by man's actions, both direct and indirect. But the tale is not over. With the help of National Zoo scientists and a network of people around the country, new chapters on the black-footed ferret are being written today. Thanks to an intense captive breeding program, the black-footed ferret population is making a rebound. Today, there are over 500 black-footed ferrets in the world, living in breeding centers and back in the wild after reintroduction efforts. Imagine a world in which a prairie, 800 miles wide, stretches from southern Canada across the western Great Plains and down to northern Mexico. Under portions of this ground exists a second world, a subterranean maze of tunnels, home to the black-footed ferret, a playful and chattering creature. In this underground labyrinth exists a highly unusual and dependent relationship in the animal kingdom. Though the nocturnal ferrets are solitary within their own species, they coexist in these burrows with prairie dogs, the creators of the tunnels. The lives of the ferrets and the prairie dog are inextricably tied. Not only do the prairie dogs create the burrows in which both species live, but the ferret also depends on the prairie dog to be its main food source. 100 years ago, this prairie life was thriving. Today, only 2% of this habitat is left. It took humans less than 100 years to drive the black-footed ferret to the brink of extinction. By 1974, the last known black-footed ferret colony disappeared, and the species was thought extinct. But then the rare and miraculous happened. A small group of ferrets was discovered near Meeteetse, Wyoming in 1981. A fragile second chance now existed for the species. However, in 1984, the roller coaster went from elation and hope to near devastation as diseases took their toll. First, sylvatic plague, a wildlife version of bubonic plague, infected the prairie dog population. Then, an epidemic of canine distemper nearly finished off the last wild population. In 1985, the Wyoming Game and Fish Department and U.S. Fish and Wildlife made a critical decision: bring the remaining black-footed ferrets into captivity. Thus, between 1985 and 1987, the last 18 black-footed ferrets on Earth were brought in from the wild to begin a breeding program. In 1987, 7 ferrets were born in Wyoming through natural breeding. They were the first surviving group born into captivity. The following year, the National Zoo's Conservation and Research Center in Front Royal, Virginia, was the first additional breeding site outside of Wyoming to receive ferrets. A new artificial insemination procedure was developed by Dr. Joe Gale Howard, a reproductive physiologist at the National Zoo. Using domestic ferrets as animal models, the new technique, called laparoscopic intrauterine artificial insemination, put sperm directly into the uterus of the female, near the ovary, increasing the chances of fertilization. In 1996, the Conservation and Research Center expanded the ferret breeding program to include assisted breeding and gathered the most genetically valuable non-breeding males from all the programs around the country. Using the new artificial insemination technique, as well as other new techniques developed for the freezing and transport of sperm, over 80 kits have subsequently been produced. In 1991, 6 years after the 18 original ferrets were brought into captivity, an important step occurred in reversing the damage done. A group of ferrets was reintroduced back into the wild in Wyoming. Each subsequent year, more ferrets have been reintroduced, and at a growing number of sites. including ones in Montana, South Dakota, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah. In 1999, 9 ferrets from the CRC were taken to Arizona, and in the year 2000, 10 kits were released back into their native habitat in South Dakota on the Cheyenne Sioux Native American Reservation. Yet, the story of the ferret is an evolving one. Remaining habitat is hard to find, and the prairie dogs, on which the ferrets are so dependent, are at the mercy of both disease and man, as they have become targets for sport shooting. But because of the National Zoo and facilities around the country, and their efforts with captive breeding, the ferret is still here, attempting to preserve its place on Earth in a fragile ecosystem.